We're going to talk about congruent triangles. Congruent triangles. Quick review. Here we have parallel lines. It's important to remember when you have parallel lines, there's many angles which are congruent. Let's do a quick review. Draw two parallel lines up in the corner here. Draw yourself a transversal. These three pairs of angles are congruent when lines are parallel. First off is alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles. The nickname I have for those are armpits of the Z. Those are always congruent. Next one is alternate exterior angles. They're opposite sides of the transversal, but outside of the lines. Those are called alternate exterior angles. Again, congruent. Last one is corresponding angles, where one is in, one is out, same side. Again, congruent. So in the diagram given, let's work with what we first have. Why don't we sweep this angle that we're given? Now let's find a corresponding angle. This right here would be corresponding. This one would also be corresponding. So all three of these angles are congruent. We also can do armpits of the Z like this. Armpits of the Z. So we can bring this angle down here as well. I'm going to write x plus 73. This is also x plus 73. Now, obviously, at some point, we have to solve for x here. So let's look at what we have. You can see that if you were to sweep these two angles together, sweep, that they would equal 180 degrees. So in this case, I can do x plus 113 plus x plus 73 equals 180. We're going to solve. First you collect like terms. So we have here 2x plus 186 equals 180. We'll subtract 186 from both sides. We get 2x, of course, equals negative 6. Therefore, x equals negative 3. We plug that in and let's solve for the angles that we can now find. Negative 3 here plus 73 would give us a measure angle of 70 degrees, which means this right here must also be 70 degrees. Armpits of the Z, this is 70 degrees, corresponding 70 degrees, vertical angles, also called bow tie angles, 70 degrees. If we do -3 right here, and 113, of course that gives you 110. We know that's correct because 110 and 70 makes 180. Means this right here is 110. This angle here is 110. That angle there is 110. This big angle here, also 110. So you can see there's a multitude of angles that you can find with a single angle when you have parallel lines. Now we're going to talk about congruent triangles. In the previous lesson, we talked how triangles can have motion, translation, rotation, and reflection. In this triangle, let's label it PQR. And then we have rotated image, and we're going to create, we rotate the triangle, the exact same triangle, and we're going to call it HIJ. Be very careful, P must align with H. So when it's rotated, H will be down here. I must align with Q. J must align with R. Now technically these are the same triangle because all we did is we took the triangle and we just rotated it. Therefore we would call these triangles congruent. When you have congruent triangles, you have a total of 6 pairs of items congruent. 3 sets of angles and 3 sets of sides. So in these circumstances, we have angle P is congruent to angle H. Angle Q is congruent to angle I. And angle R is congruent to angle J. So we have 3 pairs of angles which are congruent. In addition to that, we have 3 pairs of sides. Now watch very carefully how we do the sides. We're going to say P to Q is congruent to H to I. You have to follow the same order, P to Q, H to I. In this case, we cannot use I to H because the order we started with was P to Q, and P corresponds with H. So be very careful of your order, that you keep the same order as you walk this around. Now trace Q to R. Draw an arrow to remind yourself of the direction you're going. We're going from right angle to the toe, if you will. So your match is to go from right angle to toe as well. Last one, we're going to go toe back up to the ankle. So if we have P, Q, and R, and H, I, and J, you must keep those vertices aligned as you name them. P goes with H, Q goes with I, R goes with J. So when we have congruent triangles, there are always going to be 6 pairs of items which are congruent. 6 pairs of items which are congruent. Another way to say this is that when you have congruent triangles, then all the parts of those triangles are congruent. When you have congruent triangles, then all the parts of the triangles are congruent. Another way of saying this, the technical name is called corresponding parts of corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That means if the whole triangle is congruent, if you have 2 triangles which are congruent, then you're going to have 3 pairs of sides which are equal, and you're going to have 3 separate angles, 3 pairs of angles which are equal. A total of 6 pairs of items equal. Another way of looking at this is to say if the whole is equal, then the parts are equal. If you were to say you had 2 congruent hands, if the hands are congruent, then we can say the part of the hands are congruent, which would be the fingers. If the whole is congruent, then the parts of the whole are also congruent. Again, the more technical name for that is corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. When we're dealing with congruent triangles, we need to watch out for what defines sources of congruency. Sources of congruency. There are 3 primary sources of congruency. In class, we call them freebies. Why? Because they are always true, even if it's not listed in any kind of given information. It's always going to be true. If you see it, you can use them. They're always true. 3 common freebies when it comes into play with triangles are these. 1, if you have vertical angles, they're always going to be congruent. Those are angles that are directly across from each other. They are always going to be congruent. Here we have a side that's shared by 2 different triangles, a side that's shared by 2 different triangles. We have the triangle here on the left, and then the triangle here on the right. The side, TQ, is shared by both. We would say TQ is congruent to TQ. That's called the reflexive side. When a side is shared by 2 triangles exactly, we say it's congruent to itself. That's called a reflexive side. Another reflexive property would be a reflexive angle. Take your pen, please, and trace over this larger blue angle. Trace. Now, also trace over the smaller red angle, triangle. These two triangles overlap at exactly that angle right there at the corner there. That angle is shared by both triangles. We would call that a reflexive angle. In the diagrams below are some of these freebies. You got to learn how to mark them and recognize them. We're going to go through and mark the freebies in blue. In this one, and when you have angles that are pre-marked, I want you to start learning to put S's for pairs of sides and A's for pairs of angles. So we see here, trace over the hatch marks. That gives us a pair of sides. So we're going to write one S for each pair. And then we are told that we have a pair of angles, so we're going to put an A. And then right here's one of our freebies. That's a reflexive side. It's shared by both triangles. So we're going to put a hatch mark, and we have another pair of sides, so technically that's another S. That light blue S is a freebie. It is a reflexive side. Let's try the one on the right. Let's first mark what's given. Sweep those hatch marks. Those are a pair of angles. Put an A for a pair of angles. There's another pair of angles that are congruent. Put an A for a pair of angles. Trace over the reflexive side again. Put a hatch mark and put an S there. That gives us a reflexive side. Let's do another one. We are given these two. Trace over the hatch marks. Put an S for side. Trace over the hatch marks, put S for side. You can see there's a reflexive side there. Hatch mark, put an S for side. We have a reflexive side again. Take a close look at this last one. Again, trace over the hash marks. A pair of congruent sides, put an S. One S for each pair of sides. Trace over the other hatch marks, which gives us a pair of congruent sides. Put another S. Now another freebie are these angles which are here. Those are vertical angles. Sweep, sweep. Now because they're angles, we're going to put an A. So what's our freebie here? We have vertical angles. You need to learn to spot those freebies. Again, the 3 freebies are that you should watch out for are vertical angles, reflexive sides, and reflexive angles. Let's try a couple practice problems here. We are told that PQR is congruent to TUV. First off, let's align the letters. P goes with T. It's helpful if you have colors here. I'm going to color code P and T with R, so I'm going to circle P in blue and T in blue. We see Q and U go together. I'm going to color code those with green. So I have Q and U. The last is R and V. R and V go together. So when we want to match up a side, we want R and P. So to keep the color consistent, R I did in purple, P I did in blue. So when I want to match the side there, I have to go purple, blue as well. You can see R to P. Another way I could look at it, I'm going from triple hatch to 1 hatch. So I must follow that same order here. Triple hatch to 1 hatch. And again, the color purple to blue. So my match, my correct match, is going to be V to T. That's the correct match there. RP is congruent to VT. Here I want to say which triangles are congruent. It's very important that you align the vertices. You align the vertices. Watch the hatch marks. We have here 1 sweep and 1 sweep. So, and then here we have 2 sweeps and 2 sweeps. And here 3 sweeps and 3 sweeps. Now, it doesn't matter which order you start with, but let me give you an example here. I can go triangle, M, L, W. And there, in that left, I'm going from 1 sweep, M, to 2 sweeps, L, to 3 sweeps, W. I must match the same order on the right-hand side, 1, 2, and 3. So on the right-hand side, the 1 sweep is L, 2 sweeps is M, and then N around this way. So on the other side, the matching triangle is going to be L, then M, then N. Let's try another variation here. I'll do one side, you do the other. I'm going to go triangle, W, M, L. Notice the order there. W, M, L. I'm going triple, single, double. You do the match. Triple, single, double. The triple, single, double would be over here. The triple would be N. The single would be L. The double would be M. So you have to align your vertices because the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent.